Let me ask you this. Are you part of the middle class? Do you enjoy having a roof over your head? Well, people, I really have some pretty concerning news for y'all. Rent prices are skyrocketing, and your cozy little apartment or house might just become too expensive for you to afford. Yes, you heard that right. Why? Well, the struggle to keep a roof over your head is about to get a whole lot more real, and you need to pay attention, so tag along. You see, inflation is a serious problem that affects everyone, but it hits the middle class the hardest. If you're like most people, your biggest monthly expense is probably your rent, and with inflation on the rise, you might be wondering if you'll be able to afford it in 2023. Now, inflation is basically when your cash is worth less than it used to be, and you need more of it to buy the same things. Now, how does this all relate to rent prices in 2023? Well, rent prices are influenced by several factors, one of which is inflation. When prices rise, landlords have to pay more for their expenses, such as property taxes, maintenance, and utilities. As a result, they pass on these costs to tenants in the form of higher rent prices. Other than these, there are a few other factors out there, but the main one of those is simply supply and demand. You see, there are more people than ever that want to live in cities, and there just aren't enough apartments to go around. This has led to a bidding war for apartments, and landlords are able to charge more and more as people compete for the few available units. Add that to the skyrocketing cost of building new apartments, and you've got a recipe for skyrocketing rents. Get it? Now, after all of these, what would middle-class families do when they can't afford rent prices? Well, the first option is to downsize. This might mean moving to a smaller apartment or even a different neighborhood. While this can be a difficult decision to make, it's often the most practical one. After all, it's better to have a smaller apartment than be struggling to make rent every month. Another option is to look for roommates. Well, this might not be ideal for everyone, but it can be a great way to cut down on rent costs. You see, by sharing an apartment with someone else, you can split the rent and utilities, making it much more affordable. Of course, you'll need to find someone you can live with, but with sites like Craigslist and Facebook, it's easier than ever to find a compatible roommate. If downsizing or getting a roommate isn't an option, some families are turning to alternative housing options. This might include things like tiny homes or even converted vans. While these options can be challenging, they're also becoming increasingly popular. With the rise of the van life trend, many couples find that living in a small space can be surprisingly freeing. Of course, this isn't for everyone, but it's worth considering if you're struggling to make ends meet. Another option is to move to a cheaper city or state. This might mean leaving your current job or uprooting your family, but it can be a way to drastically cut down on housing costs. Of course, this isn't an easy decision to make, but for some families, it's the only way to stay afloat. Finally, some families are turning to unconventional solutions. This might include things like crowdfunding or even living in a commune. While these options may seem extreme, they can be a way to stay in your current city or neighborhood while being able to afford to house. Of course, you'll need to be creative and resourceful if choosing this route, but it's worth considering if you're struggling to make ends meet. Of course, all these options come with their own challenges and difficulties. Downsizing or finding a roommate can be a major adjustment, while moving to a cheaper city can mean leaving behind your friends and family. So it's quite bad if you want to live along with this hike. But why don't we take some action towards it? I mean by preparing for the potential impact of rising inflation on your rent prices in 2023. First of all, make a budget. This can be a simple plan for how you're going to spend your money each month. By creating a budget, you can identify areas where you may be overspending and you can find ways to cut back and save money. The first thing you need to do when creating a budget is to identify your income. This includes not only your salary or wages, but also any other sources of income you may have, such as a rental income or side hustles. Once you've identified your income, you need to figure out your expenses. This includes everything from rent and utilities to groceries and entertainment. Now, this is where things get a little tricky. You need to make sure that your expenses do not exceed your income. If they do, you might need to find ways to cut back. This might mean cutting out some of your discretionary expenses, such as eating out or going to the movies. It might also mean finding ways to save money on your necessities, such as buying groceries in bulk or shopping around for the best deals on utilities. And like we said before, one of the best ways to save money on your housing costs is to consider moving to a more affordable area. This might mean moving to a smaller apartment or a less trendy neighborhood, but it could save you hundreds of dollars each month. Of course, you need to make sure that the cost of moving doesn't outweigh the savings, but in many cases, it can be a great option. Next, start saving. You see, with all this inflation, imagine you're losing your job. That really scared you, right? Now, that's where emergency funds come in. There are a few key reasons why having an emergency fund is crucial, especially in today's economy. First and foremost, it provides a safety net in case of income loss. If you lose your job or experience a significant reduction in income, having an emergency fund can help you pay your bills and cover your basic needs until you're able to find a new job or increase your income. Secondly, having an emergency fund can help you avoid debt. If you don't have an emergency fund and you experience an unexpected expense or income loss, you may be forced to depend on credit cards or other forms of debt to make ends meet. This can quickly spiral out of control and lead to a cycle of debt that's difficult to break. Finally, having an emergency fund can provide peace of mind. Knowing that you have a safe cushion to fall back on in case of a financial emergency can help alleviate stress and anxiety and allow you to focus on other aspects of your life. Finally, advocate for policy change. This means getting involved in your community and pushing for policies that will help make housing more affordable for everyone. One policy that's gaining traction is rent control. Rent control is a policy that limits how much landlords can charge for rent, and it's been proven to be effective in keeping housing affordable in cities like New York and San Francisco. But it is important to know that rent control alone isn't enough to solve the problem. We need a comprehensive approach that includes other policies as well. Another policy that can help is the expansion of affordable housing programs. This means investing in programs that provide subsidies for low-income families to help them afford to house, as well as increasing funding for the construction of new affordable housing units. Additionally, we can push for policies that address the root causes of rising housing costs. This means investing in education and job training programs to help people get better paying jobs and addressing the cost of construction materials and labor by promoting innovation and competition in these industries. But all these policies require action. We need to get involved in our communities and advocate for change. This means attending town hall meetings, writing letters to our elected officials, and participating in local organizations that are working towards affordable housing solutions. Alright now, if you're a middle class guy, you better buckle up because things are about to get bumpy. Rent prices are skyrocketing, and the reality is most families won't be able to keep up. So if you're thinking of moving out, or even upgrading your living situation, you might want to think twice. It's a tough pill to swallow, but we have to face the facts. Anyway, do drop what you guys think in the comment section below. We'll meet again in another episode.